Now that you have had the opportunity to complete your final test, you will have received a score from the computer. I want to go over the answers to this test so that you know why the answers are what they are. If you made 100% on your exam, you probably don't even need to watch this video. Remember, 80% is mastery, and let's figure out there are 25 questions, so we want to do 80% of 25, and that would be 0.80 times 25, and I believe that is going to be 20, but let me just do that on my calculator to be sure. 0.80 times 25 is 20. So if you got 20 questions correct or more, you have mastered this course, this reading course. So let's take a look at these questions on this test and see why our answers are what they are. This is page, I'm sorry, this is not page anything. This is from the exam on the computer. So here is passage 1. It says to read passages 1 and 2, then answer questions 1 through 9. Passage 1. Human brains have a bias for negative experiences. Think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors. They needed to be constantly aware of dangers, such as large animals and people from neighboring tribes. If they weren't alert, the result could be death. The problem is that today our brains still have a negative bias. This can make us unhappy for no good reason. Studies have found, for example, that we need to have 5 positive interactions to make up for 1 bad one. The good news is that our brains continue to change throughout our lives. This is called neuroplasticity. It was once believed that our brains stopped changing when we reached maturity. But scientists now know the brain never stops changing. Our brains make small changes with every thought or emotion we have. Over time, when these thoughts and emotions are repeated, they change how our brains work. You can see this in musicians. Their brains are different from other people's. People who learn a second language also change their brain structure. Neuroplasticity means it is possible to overcome our brain's negative bias. We can make small positive changes over time to train our brains to focus on the good. And I want to just share something with you. Anytime you see neuro, you can think of brain. A neurosurgeon is a brain surgeon. A neurologist is a doctor who studies the brain. So neuro relates to the brain. Passage 2. Because our brains have a negative bias, they are always looking for what will go wrong. Simply having many happy experiences may not make you happy. The psychologist, Dr. Rick Hanson, has found that we have to pay attention to good experiences to be happy. He says we can use our thoughts and experiences to change our brains and become happier, calmer people. Here's how. Look for good experiences. They can be something simple, like a positive interaction with a child or a warm bath. When something good happens, take about 30 seconds to notice how you feel. When you reflect on your day later, take time, at least 30 seconds, to remember the good experiences. Savor the feelings. Remember what happened. do this often. Use your memories of positive experiences to shift your mood. Our minds often recall negative experiences. You may wake up and find yourself thinking about something that brings you anguish. Recall something that brings you joy or peace instead. Remember the positive feeling. Recall what happened. As you relive the positive experience, the negative thoughts will fade away. Your mood will lift as a result. If you do these practices over time, you will feel the positive effects on your brain. You will become happier and calmer. Question 1. In passage 1, which detail best supports the idea that human brains today have a negative bias? So here is the claim. We're looking for the best support. Today, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. That's true, but that was in the past. Hunter-gatherers paid attention to threats. That was true, but that was in the past. It takes 5 positive experiences to make up for a bad one. Or people could be killed by large animals or people from other tribes. Again, that was in the past. So I am looking at option C for this answer. This is talking about brains today. In passage 1, what is the main idea of the second paragraph? Well, remember that anytime it refers me to a specific place, I want to look at that first. So the first passage, the second paragraph. And this is the one that's talking about neuroplasticity. If I had to make a topic for this paragraph, I would probably use that word. That our brains can be trained to think more positively. So let's look at our choices. Human brains change throughout our lives. People who learn a second language change their brains. That's true, but it's too narrow. This is true. Musicians' brains are different from the brains of others. That is true, but it is too narrow. It doesn't talk about other people. Just musicians is not enough. It was believed our brains stopped changing at maturity, but now we know differently. So the best answer for this one, I'm going to go with A. Human brains change throughout our lives. Number 3. According to passage 1, what is neuroplasticity? Well, I know that neuro means brain, but unfortunately all of those have brain in them. So the question is, what is plasticity? Well, that makes me think of plastic. It makes me think of something that I can bend or shape or change. So let's look back at passage 1 and the word neuroplasticity. It says this is called neuroplasticity. Well, what is this? What's the this it's talking about? The good news is that our brains continue to change throughout our lives. So plasticity refers to change, or the ability to mold or shape something, just like you can plastic. What is the best summary of passage 1? Now remember, a summary has to be just right. Our brains have a negative bias because our ancestors were in constant threat. They needed to be aware of dangers that could kill them. Well, let's look back at passage 1. That was definitely part of the story, but not all of the story. So that is a true statement, but it's too narrow as a summary. Put it over here. Okay, B. Our brain's negative bias kept our ancestors safe, but can now make us unhappy. Over time, we can make positive changes to our brains to overcome this bias. So this one talks about the past, the present, and also those changes, that neuroplasticity. I think that's it, but let's read the others. Our brains change throughout our lives. We see this in the brains of musicians and people who speak two languages. Okay, that's true, but it's too narrow. It does not talk about our ancestors and the threats they faced. Our brain's negative bias can make us unhappy for no good reason. We need many more good experiences than bad ones to feel happy. Again, that's too narrow. It does not discuss the ancestors and the problems they faced. This one is just right. It talks about the ancestors, it talks about now, and it talks about neuroplasticity. Read the sentence from passage 2. You may wake up and find yourself thinking about something that brings you anguish. What is the meaning of anguish as it is used in this sentence? Is it happiness, peace, pain, or boredom? Anguish is C, pain. Remember, it tells us to instead think of things that are joyous and peaceful. That's the opposite of anguish. So anguish is pain. Those are synonyms. You feel sad one morning. According to passage 2, what can happen as a result of recalling a positive experience? So let's look back just to be sure. Passage 2, you wake up. Here we go. Wake up and find yourself thinking about something that brings you anguish. Recall something that brings you joy or peace instead. Remember the positive feeling. Recall what happened. As you relive the positive, the negative will fade away. Your mood will lift as a result. That is the effect of thinking positively. So I'm going to go with D. Your mood lifts. Number 7. In passage 2, what do the first 2 bullets teach the reader to do? It's referring me back to a specific place and to these first 2 bullets. Look for good experiences and remember good experiences. Okay. To notice, recall, and savor good experiences. That's it. To ignore and deny bad experiences. To give equal attention to good experience and bad experience. Remember that one said you have to think of 5 good ones to 1 bad one. So that is not equal. To stop thinking about an experience, good or bad, after it happens. No, we want to notice and remember the good times. What is the best summary of passage 2? So let's look back. It's referring me back to passage 2. This is the one that talked about the 3 ways to lift your mood, and that if you do these practices over time, you will train yourself to be happier and calmer. When you notice good events, fewer bad events will happen to you and you will become happier. It did not say that fewer bad things will happen. If you pay equal attention to the good and bad things that happen to you, your brain will become happier over time. And again, it's not equal attention. Remember, the ratio is 5-1 of happy to bad. Dr. Rick Hansen has found that just having good experiences is not enough to make you happy. Okay, let's look back and see if it said that. So I'm looking for Rick Hansen, and that is true. Rick Hansen right here has found that we have to pay attention to those experiences. So that's definitely a true statement, but it's really too narrow. That's only one part of that passage. When you notice happy events, recall them and use them to replace negative thoughts, you become happier over time. This is a process that you have to consistently follow to change your way of thinking. And finally, number 9. What is the best description of the two passages? Passage 1 and passage 2 use a problem and solution text structure to address the same topic. Passage 1 and passage 2 use a problem and solution text structure but address different topics. Passage 1 explains negative bias and why it can be overcome. And passage 2 tells what to do to be happier. Passage 1 explains that brains age over time, and passage 2 tells how to keep your brain engaged. Okay, the answer to this one, this is a tricky one, I think. There are 2 problems that are being explained here. Passage 1 explains negative bias and why it can be overcome. Passage 2 tells what you can do to be happier. Let's see why the others are not the same, or are not answers. In A, they do not address the same topic. Passage B, you could almost get away with that one. It really is not a problem-solution structure, even though I would say that they, let's go with this, that they address similar topics. Let me go back here just a second. Passage 1 does not have any bullet points. It's just a narrative type structure. Passage 2 is more of a step. It's not really step by step, but it has the bullet points to help you see what to do about the given problem. So the structures are different, even though they're the topics are similar. I'm not doing a very good job explaining that one. This is a tough question. D, passage 1 explains that brains age over time. That's really not what it was explaining. It mentioned that brains mature, but it doesn't talk about aging, getting older. And passage 2 does talk about keeping the brain engaged, but it's for a specific purpose, to be happier. Okay, this is not an easy passage by any means. Okay, I'm going to stop this video and we'll pick up the next section in the next clip.